I'm Carole Leathem, and you're listening to the Caretakers Journey podcast. I am your host, and we are in week 4 of a series on my book, Are You Ready to Find Joy When Life Gets Messy? Today we are looking at chapters 5 and 6, so grab a cup of coffee or tea and let's dive in. Chapter 5, the difference between living in fear and living with fear. This is a biggie. What if had become the question I tormented myself with for 2 years after Bill was released from the psychiatric hospital. I would play the what if game about the past. What if I'd seen it coming? What if I did something to cause the breakdown? What if I could have prevented it? Then I would switch to the future. What if I can't help him? What if the suicidal thoughts come back? What if we can't find a medication that works? Or what if the medication stops working? What will happen if he stops taking his medication again? To complicate things, I felt this intense pressure from Bill's needs. He would say to me over and over, I need you to help. You will help me, won't you? Promise you will help me. My spirit almost broke when Bill's psychiatrist and caseworker both started telling me the same thing every single time I spoke to them. They both said this. Just keep him alive until we find the right medication. Just keep him alive. Between my what if questions and being told to just keep him alive, the pressure began to take a toll on my own health. One day I was sitting in my car after a counselor had told me, I don't know how to help you through this, and I don't want to keep taking your money. I was mad, I was scared, and I was talking to God because I'm thinking, how can he not help me? The rain was beating down on the roof of my car. I was yelling at God. He's got nothing? A trained counselor can't help me? As I sat there crying, I heard God very clearly say to me, Carole, you have to let Bill go. It's not your job to keep him alive. You can't change, stop, or fix this. Bill is in my hands. Your job is to love Bill and trust me. Wow. Just wow. This felt like the most irresponsible thing that I could do. You see, I'm a get it done girl. I protect those who belong to me like a mama pit bull, and now God is telling me to let it go. In the next few moments, as I sat there listening to the rain, I lifted my hands and imagined that Bill was in them. I then said out loud, Here he is. Then I turned my hands over and put them back in my lap. I felt free for the first time since this had all started. That day, I learned that even though I had released my responsibility for Bill to God, I still had to live with the real fear of Bill's illness. There was a real possibility that he would not get better. And trusting God didn't take away that fear. But I began to learn that trusting God helps me live with the fear, but not in the fear. You see, when I'm living in fear, I'm taking charge in an unhealthy way. When I'm living in fear, I either am trying to relive the past or pre-live the future. This is the foundation of where my what if questions were coming from. What if I had only finished the sentence? This is me trying to relive the past. We can't change the past. It's already happened, and it's a permanent part of our lives now, my life now. When I start saying, what if this happens? I'm now starting to try to control the future because of my fear. I'm taking charge of things that haven't happened yet or may never happen. I began to imagine circumstances and pre-plan my reactions. When I am caught up in living in fear, I'm trying to control things that are both out of my control, both past and future. Let me say that again. When I'm caught up living in fear, I'm trying to control things out of my control, both past and future. Now, living with fear is being present. For me, it's keeping my focus on a faithful God and knowing that I will know what to do when a situation comes up. I'm not pre-planning my responses. I have to choose daily to live with fears, sometimes multiple times a day. I wear a silver ring on my middle finger of my left hand. You would never know that it is a reminder to keep my eyes and focus on the present, until you looked at the words that are hidden on the inside rim of the ring. You can do hard things. For me, one of the hard things is to stay present and live with fear, not in fear. So, what are some of the truths from this chapter? Let me kind of go over those with you. First, we must realize what is our responsibility and what is not. That's a big one. What is our responsibility and what is not? When we live in fear, we're trying to control circumstances out of our control. We need to change our what if questions to, okay, what now? When we live with fear, we're trusting God. In my book, I talk about using fear as a protector and how it can inspire hands on exercises, such as creating a safe zone, which I've now renamed the blue tape box therapy. And if you read the book, you'll understand that. I listen to worship songs and I have a specialized playlist called When Life Gets Scary. I live with my palms facing up, remembering that I'm constantly having to give bill to God, but also it's become kind of a way that I can listen. It's a way that I can hear without listening. I use fear as a motivator, and this can inspire me to live in care, not control. Think about that for a minute. When we're living in care, we're living way different and treating our loved one way different than when we're living in control. I've also learned to love 3 seconds at a time. Sometimes I have to go back and go 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm going to love again 3 seconds at a time. You know, the scripture in James 1:3 says, you know that under pressure, your faith life is forced into the open and shows its true colors. So don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work so that you can become mature and well developed, not deficient in any way. So, what are a few post it note moments that I have in my window that come from this chapter? Well, here's one. Let him go. Your job, Carole, is to love him and trust me. I can live with fear and not in fear because I trust God. I must live in my safe zone. I live with my palms facing up. I will live in care, not control. I will love Bill 3 seconds at a time. I also have this scripture: be good to me, God, because I run to you for my dear life. So here's a couple of to-do lists, things to put on your to-do list, maybe as you're thinking about this. Are you asking what if questions? Well, I would challenge you to begin to live in the moment and instead ask, what now? Is there a pressure that you're feeling that you can't fix and it's not your responsibility? Are you ready and willing to place your mess in your palms and lift it up and let it go? Do you know how to create a safe zone? There again, that's the blue tape box therapy. I live with my palms facing up. Do you live with your palms facing up, understanding that you cannot control the circumstances? Right now, as I navigate through the hospice and watching my mom fail day by day by day, I'm constantly having to put my palms up, put my mom in there, and understand I can't fix it. All I can do is love her. Do you have a When Life Gets Scary playlist? I would challenge you to create one. I have one and I listen to it constantly. Ask yourself, how can I make a change and live in care, not control? What do you need to do to love 3 seconds at a time? I would challenge you also, as we close out of this chapter, to spend some time quietly reflecting on Psalm 57, 1 through 11. As I read this passage, imagine the I is you. I, Carole, Carole's ready. Put your name in there. Carole is ready. God's so ready from head to toe, ready to sing, ready to raise a tune. Wake up, soul. Wake up, harp. Wake up, lute. Wake up, you sleepy sun. I'm thanking you, God. Carole is thanking you, God, out loud in the streets, singing your praises in town and country. The deeper your love, the higher it goes. Every cloud is a flag to your faithfulness. Soar high in the skies, O God. Cover the whole earth with your glory. Amen. Now let's go and dive into chapter 6. This was an especially hard one because it's talking about facing the opposition that comes with obedience. And my life this last decade has been obedience and facing opposition. The chapter starts out, have you ever wanted to scream, "It's not contagious"? When people act strange after a mental illness diagnosis, I have so wanted to scream that. I have seen people who we considered friends walk away. I've had people say really stupid things, offering ideas about demon possession and using an exorcist. Ugh. At one point, I attended a statewide convention where I knew most of the people attending. I tried to talk to one of the leaders about the isolation and the disconnection that I was feeling. I told them that I was not alone and that I knew of other families in similar circumstances trying to find resources. I'll never forget the look on his face and the tone in his voice when he said to me, and just what do you think we can do about this? As I walked away that day, I felt contagious for the first time. I didn't fit in the room anymore. I didn't fit in that world anymore. I had belonged to that world for over 30 years, and they couldn't and didn't want to help me. I struggled with the reality that no one wanted or knew how to deal with the mental problems that my husband was facing, the world was facing, especially because it was dealing with a pastor. A few days later, I got an email from a pastor with a blog attached. It was a man I knew well. It was a man I respected. He wrote in the email, I found this blog. Grab a cup of coffee and read. As I read more and more of the blog, my heart sank. The message of the blog was the writer feeling like a life-weary, broken down, miserable woman. And the writer finally compared herself to Job's wife. And if you know anything about the story of Job, Job's wife was not a very good person. As I finished the blog that day, I began to ask myself, did the pastor mean this was me? Am I the life-weary, broken down, miserable woman? Is that how people saw me? I began to feel so guilty about being raw and transparent with our journey. I had promised God, I knew that He wanted me to do this. I had promised God that I would let people see my faith life in my struggles. And now I'm beginning to feel like everyone was judging and staring at me. Well, a few weeks later, I was sitting in my quiet time and I heard God whisper softly, girl, yeah, that's how He talks to me. Girl, you heard me correctly. I'm proud of how brave you have been. Keep trusting, keep sharing, and keep choosing joy. Your story will help so many people. I have discovered that those who stare and judge are buying into a big fat lie, and it is a doozy. Now, this lie is here. Let me tell you what this lie is. When our lives are perfect, we are blessed by God. But when we have trials, there must be hidden sin and God must be angry with us. Guys, I knew this lie existed, but I was now experiencing it for the first time, firsthand, personally. So here's the truth. There's no hidden sin. Bill is an incredibly loving husband and father and grandfather who suffers from a genetic imbalance, chemical imbalance that produces anxiety. This anxiety causes him to try and control everything to relieve his pain. When he can't control life, he becomes depressed. And without medication, The suicidal ideation floods his mind, and he starts thinking about killing himself to relieve the pain. It's a cycle I've seen him go through for 10 years now. I now understand that he has struggled with anxiety his entire life, and somewhere along the way, his system could no longer handle the pressure. I've also learned that isolation is not the answer. And it was so easy for me to think about being isolated and isolating and running away. If you're like me, it feels like you're going to crawl into the bed of life and pull the covers over your head. This way, no one can hurt you. It might feel safe and warm at first, but when the isolation becomes unhealthy, we need to stop shutting people out. Yes, there are people who can hurt us. Yes, there are people who can and will support us. And if we isolate, we shut out the ones who can hurt us, yes, but we also shut out the ones who can help us. And some of the dumb and painful things that people say and do can also help us. Yes, you heard me correctly. When life is painful enough, we have to choose isolation or investigation. Well, I used to choose isolation, but now I choose investigation. I listen, I evaluate, and I make changes as needed. I'll step up, I look inside, and guess what? I'm not a broken down, miserable, life weary woman who finally turned her back on God. No, guys, I have been glued to God's side since before Bill's breakdown, and I have moved even closer over the past 10 years. So, are people judging and staring? Yes. James says, when you are under pressure, your faith life will be on display. I see now that the Caretakers Journey podcast and community was God's plan. What I had always hoped for was to be open, transparent, authentic, and available, and it's happened. I want people to choose joy when life gets chaotic and messy. I want people to see a personal God who is already there when we need them, when we need him. I want my life to be a story that draws people in so they're cheering me on, yet they're wondering how I'm not flat on the floor in a puddle. I want people to watch. I want them to stare before, during, and after the mess. You can't know me without knowing that I'm a daddy's girl, and my daddy is God. So let's talk about a couple of truths from this chapter. People don't know what to say to you, so they walk away. Most of the people that have walked away, I think, are walking away because they don't understand. They're afraid. They wonder, how could this happen? Could it happen to me? And they don't know what to say, so they'll walk away. One of the truths is, I just need you to come and sit with me. I need you to give me a hug. I need you to just make me laugh. Another truth is that Christian resources for mental illness are hard to find. And people can be very judgmental when it comes to dealing with circumstances like mental health. Ask for help in discerning the truth when people say dumb things. When I got that email from that pastor, I forwarded it to a friend and I said, I don't know what to make of this. She stopped what she was doing and she read the email and then she called me and she said, Carole, here's the truth. One, he didn't read the email or he would have never sent it. Two, he doesn't know you. Or three, he was not thinking straight and you need to delete this thing and just move on. She helped me. She helped me understand that day that the email was maybe sent with goodwill, but it didn't bring goodwill with it. Obedience to God is more important than people's comfort. That's why I have conversations. That's why I'm very authentic and transparent. That's why I want people to understand the depth of pain and struggle that I go through in being faithful to my husband and to God. God uses our stories. Mine and yours will help so many people. Isolation is not the answer. And guess what? We can learn from the dumb things that people say. So, what are some sticky note moments? It's not contagious. Is everyone staring at me? Yep. And I'm going to point them right to God and the truth. God said, "You heard me correctly, Carole. I'm proud of how brave you've been. Keep trusting, keep sharing, keep choosing joy." And then I wrote this statement: I want my life to be a story that pulls you, listener, into it, cheering me on while at the same time you're wondering, how is she not flat on the floor in a puddle? So here's your to-do list as we close out chapter 6. Do you buy into the lie that if our lives are perfect, we're blessed? But if we have trials, there must be some hidden sin and God must be angry with us? Well, just stop. It's not true. It's a big bad lie. Think about the dumb things people have said to you. Can you use them to evaluate your mess and learn from them? Do you struggle with isolation? Who are you shutting out? Who do you need to let in? Are people staring? Is your faith life on display? Thank you so much for joining me today. I will be back next week and we're going to dive into 7 and 8. And until then, it's all about Him.